Hello, creative friends. This is Joy. So today I am trying to create a cover for a travel journal that I want to put these composition books into, along with a couple of other books that I'll be making. And so I bought this raw canvas, and it was like just a drop cloth that to use for this, and I'm just trying to cut it down, a piece of it down to the size that I think that I'll need to make this cover. And this is going to be a travel journal type cover, and I do want to have a flap on it. So I'm actually cutting the canvas bigger than I think I'm going to need, and I take some just regular white gesso and a credit card, and I scrape it over the top of the canvas on the one side, and I let it dry, and then I flip the canvas over and I do the same on the other side. I just scrape it with the gesso and let it dry. This will help it to stiffen up the canvas, and plus to make it prep it for other mediums. So here is the canvas after it's dried, and here are the other books that I created. I just measured the size of the composition books and cut paper, folded it, and stapled it into three other books. I used mixed media paper to create the other three books that I want to put into this cover. So right now I'm trying to determine the size that I need. Like I said in the beginning, I made it bigger than I needed it to be, and so that I can trim it down whenever I got to this point. So I'm figuring up how much do I want at the top and the bottom, and I left about 3/4 of an inch at the top and the bottom from the height of the books, but I should have left a little bit more. I would have liked it to have been, at least closer to an inch. But it all works out in the end. It's fine. And so I'm trying to make sure that I measure so that it's, because it is so close to the size of the height of the book, that I don't want to go have it to be crooked to the point to where it's not, going to wrap around and be at least somewhat straight, I guess, if that makes sense. So that's why I'm trying to be careful to make sure that I measure and then it's the same size on one side as it is on the other. And then here I just cut off the excess. And at this point, I'm thinking that I may, just decorate the outside and leave the inside this the white gessoed canvas. And that was my intention when I started decorating the outside of the cover. And here I'm just double checking to see how that looks. And yeah, it looks pretty good. But you'll see here a little bit later on, after I finish I decide to paint the inside of the cover as well, instead of leaving it white. So here I decided to take out some stencils, and I decided that rather than just painting the cover or trying to collage something onto it, that I would use some modeling paste to add texture to the cover. And there goes my clock. It's like right over my head, so I apologize for the clock. So I'm just trying to figure out, I want one of these animals on the cover, and I'm just trying to figure out, where exactly on the front of the cover I want it, so that I make sure I get it in the right place. And I decided to go with this owl, and I wanted it on the flap. So I'm putting it in that upper left hand corner there, so that then when the flap folds over to the front, then you'll see the owl up on the top. So I'm just putting the modeling paste on a credit card and then trying to smooth it over the top of that stencil. And then I have these other stencils with different shapes to them that I'm just going to, in various locations, scrape that onto the cover. And as I'm doing this, at one point my camera, I guess, decides that it's going to shut off. But I mean, it's the same thing over and over again. I just take a stencil and scrape through it with some modeling paste, and there's a few areas where I would just scrape up any, like, where it was like excess or where I felt that, I didn't want the modeling paste. Here's another stencil that I have that I liked to use on here. So then after that dries, I decided to paint the whole thing with like a chocolate brown color. And so I'm really having to, with the canvas and then the texture and all that, really having to scrub this into the front here and get it into every nook and cranny. But I do manage to get it covered. And at this point, I was still thinking that I was going to leave the inside white, so I was trying to be careful not to let the paint get on the other side of it. But I ended up deciding otherwise. So I had some other kind of metallic paint that I brushed over the brown, and then the texture wasn't standing out as much as I'd wanted it to. So I grabbed this other copper metallic paint to try to get the texture of the modeling paste that I put on here to stand out. And it seemed like, because at first with the other metallic paint, I just brushed it on, but it seemed like that my finger was working better to get to lightly graze over the top of those textured areas to get them to stand out. So here's where I just went and decided to do the inside of the cover brown like I did the outside. And then I take some of that same kind of metallic brown that I brushed on the front cover and brushed it on the inside just to give it a little bit of a variation. And originally when I brushed it on the front, I was going to just brush it over the tops of the texture, but it didn't seem like it showed up very much, and it was kind of getting everywhere, so I just ended up brushing it everywhere and then going back with the copper metallic too and my finger to get the texture to stand out. Excuse me. So here I'm just trying to mark where I want to put my grommets to run my elastic. And so I'm just measuring the one side to make sure that I get the holes on the other side somewhat close and around the same distance apart. And this particular pen was about dried up, so I had to grab a different one, and this blue pen really helped, for me to be able to see where I need to punch those holes. So then I went in and I punched the holes, and I had to adjust. There's like a little slide on here to adjust how far the material could, slide into the device to punch the hole. So I was just trying to make sure that I got that at the right depth. And then I got my eyelets and set the eyelets using this same tool. And it's really simple to use. You'll see here in a little bit, I have to put an eyelet in the middle of the book in order to do an elastic to go around the whole thing and for a closure. And since I couldn't use this tool, I tried, but I couldn't get it far enough in there to set the grommet and punch the hole. I had to use a different method, and I struggled a bit with it. But in any case, so I got my elastic and I started stringing it through the holes. And so I went, back and forth and then came back the other way. I don't know why I started in the second one. I should have started in the first one, but irregardless, I managed to make it work. So here I come to, the end of my string, and I'm like, well, I'm not done, so I need to finish the rest of it. So I just kind of measured and then continued from the other end to string the rest of it and then tie it off. And then I put a little bit of glue because I was afraid that that might come untied and I didn't want to cut off those tails and have it come untied. So I decided to put some tacky glue on there and let that dry just to make sure that it, secures that knot and doesn't allow it to come undone. And then here I am trying to straighten out the strings a little bit. And you want the strings with a little bit of tension, but not too much. It took me a couple of times to get the tension right. But yeah. And so here I'm trying to measure and add the hole in the middle for the closure. And I had to use a pair of scissors to poke a hole through the middle and put my eyelet in there. And so, since I couldn't get the other tool in there to set the eyelet, I had this hammer that had a thing on the end that's supposed to be an eyelet setter, but I struggled with trying to figure out how to get it to set the eyelet, but I smashed the crap out of it, so it was secure. It was good enough. So then I figure out, okay, how much elastic do I need to go around the book? I tie a knot in the end of it and put it from the inside through the hole, through where I had the eyelet, and cut off those tails. And then I have my closure. So that's pretty much the book cover that I made. I hope you guys like this. If you do, you can give me a thumbs up. You can also leave a comment, or you can subscribe to my channel. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.